the works that I've done recently are for instruments and the computer doing some kind of signal processing.
Okay.
So the computer in that circumstance is a live performing instrument.
Okay, so and you are working on it, obviously, while it's going.
Well, actually, not necessarily. Yeah, I mean, obviously the premiere or whatever, I'm involved in a performance. But I have one work called Tephillah for clarinet and signal processors that rather than them using any specific technology to perform the work, in the beginning of the piece there are pages of instructions for the kind of sound I want, and it's up to some artist to figure out what technology to use. The problem with specifying particular technology, giving them a max patch, or telling them to use a lexicon this or a harmonizer that, is that those boxes become obsolete. So then what happens if 5 years from now you want to play the piece, you're up a creek. In fact, I am, in a circumstance like that, I'm helping to realize a work by a Finnish composer for a performance at the University of Chicago in March. And the work was created at EarCom just 5 years ago, but it refers to machinery and to Max versions that are out of that are obsolete. I mean, when I tried to run it on my Power Mac downstairs, my Power Book, or my MacBook, it crashed Max and it crashed the computer. Yeah. Well, I eventually found an older version of Max that it would run under, but that's the problem. So rather than create works that involve specific technology, what I do is I try to describe the effect I want and the process I want, and I leave it to some electronic musician to realize that. So at least in Tephillah, which has enjoyed quite a bit of performances, a clarinetist will want to do the work, and then they will go out and find somebody who is conversant and expert at working with electronic audio systems and or computer, and they will figure out a way to program it based upon my instructions. And I've had everything from people coming up with their own max patches. I got one guy in Germany did the whole thing with Super Collider, which is an entirely different programming language, and a guy up in New England did it with manually with a bunch of signal processors and a mixing board, which must have taken some serious finger wiggling because it's fairly complicated. And so of course the piece I wrote in the 90s, but it lives on because clarinetists enjoy it and because it's not fixated on a particular technology. And that is the approach that I've continued to use. So I will do a particular version of the piece the first time out, and then when it becomes published and released, people will have, the conventional musical part. So for instance, there are all these cues. You'll see the numbers. One is down here, but 2 through 9, each of them which describe a specific sort of process. And then it's up to some artist to figure out how to do that using whatever technology is available. So that when you look at the score, what you see is the clarinet part, and then a second part for the audio processing musician. The best way to describe what that person does. Oh. And the big number is which of those processes they're supposed to be playing. And then there's a dynamic and a send and a return. It's telling them which of the clarinet part to put into the processor and how much to bring back. And then sometimes I'll even use musical notation in the audio processors section to indicate what note should be hanging on. So all the sounds that are created from the clarinet and then processed by the computer. And so between the instructions and between the notation that's in the score, somebody playing a computer and a bunch of processors, or even manually, can realize the piece. And there's a fair amount of artistic license, but there always is. I mean, no two clarinetists sound the same, and they don't interpret it the same. So I've created repertoire, recognizing that people manipulating electronic devices in a musical setting are musicians, and all they need are things to play. So my works since this piece have been like this. Sometimes with small ensembles, sometimes with large ensembles, and then of course I also compose for just conventional musical instruments. But I wrote this piece in 1990 and it still gets played because of course it's doable. It's not tied to a specific technology. Because whatever I would have used in 1990 would be long gone by now.